There is a kind of destruction that does not come from the sky. It does not arrive in the form of a rocket, a drone, or an artillery shell. It starts as a whisper, a suspicion, a cold realization that creeps through a military headquarters like poison through a bloodstream. The realization that someone in your own ranks, someone who sits in your briefings, someone who reads your orders, someone who knows your plans before you execute them, is giving everything to the enemy. That realization hit a Russian brigade headquarters in eastern Ukraine approximately 4 weeks ago. And what followed was not just a series of devastating Ukrainian strikes, it was the systematic disintegration of a Russian formation from the inside, as paranoia, suspicion, and internal chaos inflicted more damage on the brigade than any external weapon could achieve. This is the story of the mole, or at least the story of what the mole left behind. Because as of the latest confirmed intelligence reports, it remains unknown whether the Russian brigade ever identified the source of the leak. What is known, confirmed through multiple open-source intelligence channels, intercepted Russian communications and battlefield analysis, is the trail of destruction that the leak enabled and the organizational collapse that the hunt for the leaker caused. The first indication that something was wrong came during the first week. A Russian supply convoy, 8 trucks carrying ammunition and fuel, departed a logistics hub in the Russian rear area and drove toward forward positions along a route that had been designated as secure just 48 hours earlier. The route had been chosen specifically because it avoided roads that Ukrainian forces had previously targeted. It passed through villages that Russian intelligence assessed as safe. The convoy timing was randomized, departing at an irregular hour to avoid pattern analysis by Ukrainian surveillance. The convoy was ambushed 11 kilometers into its journey. Ukrainian artillery, pre-positioned with exact coordinates of the road segment the convoy would traverse, opened fire the moment the vehicles entered the kill zone. 8 trucks, 6 destroyed, 2 damaged and abandoned. The Russian drivers and escort personnel suffered heavy casualties. The ammunition and fuel, enough to sustain a battalion for a week, burned on the roadside. Russian logistics officers were alarmed, but not yet suspicious. Convoys get hit. Ukrainian drones are everywhere. Perhaps the route had been spotted by aerial surveillance. They changed the route, changed the timing, sent the next convoy 2 days later along a completely different road. That convoy was hit too. Same pattern, artillery waiting at the exact point where the vehicles would pass. 6 of 7 trucks destroyed, supplies lost, personnel killed. Stay with this story. What happened over the next 3 weeks turned a series of successful Ukrainian strikes into something far more devastating. A psychological weapon that hollowed out an entire Russian brigade from within. The third strike erased any possibility of coincidence. A Russian artillery battery, 2 S-19 MSTAS self-propelled howitzers and 2 D-30 towed howitzers, had been repositioned to a new firing location after intelligence suggested their previous position had been compromised. The new position was chosen by the battery commander in consultation with the brigade artillery chief. The coordinates were communicated only through encrypted channels to a limited number of staff officers. The battery moved at night, set up in the new position, and began operations at dawn. By noon, the battery was destroyed. Ukrainian HIMARS rockets struck the position with precision that indicated exact coordinate knowledge. Not area fire, not searching fire, but direct hits on the individual howitzer positions. All 4 guns were eliminated. The crews suffered severe casualties. A battery that had been operational for hours at a position known only to a handful of Russian officers was wiped off the map. The brigade commander, a colonel, convened an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The question was no longer whether Ukrainian intelligence was unusually good. The question was whether someone inside the headquarters was providing targeting information directly to the enemy. The accusation, spoken or unspoken, changed everything. Which scenario is more damaging to a military unit? Losing equipment to enemy fire, or discovering that the enemy knows every move before you make it? Tell us in the comments. The 4th week brought the most dramatic strike. Russian engineers had established a new fuel storage point, a collection of bladder tanks and fuel trucks positioned in a wooded area approximately 15 kilometers behind the front. The location was selected personally by the brigade's logistics officer. The coordinates were shared with exactly 4 people: the logistics officer, the brigade commander, the operations officer, and the communications chief. No written orders were issued. The information was communicated verbally, in person, inside the brigade command post. The fuel depot was struck by Ukrainian drones and artillery the same night it was established. The bladder tanks erupted in fireballs that were visible for kilometers. The fuel trucks detonated, over 200,000 liters of diesel, enough to sustain the brigade's vehicles for over a week, burned in a conflagration that lasted until dawn. Russian soldiers at forward positions watched the distant glow and understood immediately what it meant. They would not be receiving fuel. Their vehicles would not move. Their generators would not run. Their war was about to get much, much harder. But the fuel was not the real damage. The real damage was what happened at the brigade headquarters in the hours and days that followed. The colonel called another meeting. This time the atmosphere was different. According to intercepted communications fragments and subsequent intelligence analysis, the meeting was not a discussion. It was an interrogation. The brigade commander directly accused members of his own staff of treason. The logistics officer, the man who had personally selected the fuel depot location, was removed from his position and placed under armed guard. The communications chief was ordered to surrender his personal phone and all electronic devices. The operations officer was transferred to a different posting pending investigation. In a single meeting, the brigade lost 3 of its most senior staff officers, not to Ukrainian fire, but to its own commander's suspicion, and the paranoia spread. Intercepted Russian radio traffic from the following days revealed a formation consuming itself with suspicion. Officers stopped sharing information with each other. Planning meetings were restricted to 2 or 3 people instead of the full staff. Operational orders were changed multiple times before execution, the brigade commander altering plans at the last minute on the assumption that any plan shared with more than a handful of people was already compromised. Communications procedures were overhauled daily. New encryption codes, new frequencies, new call signs, creating confusion among the very units that needed clear, consistent orders to function. The effects on combat operations were catastrophic. The first and most immediate consequence was the collapse of offensive capability. 2 planned Russian assault operations, both of which had been in preparation for weeks, with ammunition stockpiled, units briefed and coordination orders issued, were postponed indefinitely. The brigade commander, now convinced that any plan shared with his staff would reach Ukrainian intelligence within hours, refused to approve final execution orders. He demanded that planning be restarted from scratch, with information restricted to himself and 2 trusted subordinates. But 2 officers cannot plan a brigade-level operation. The work that had previously been distributed among a staff of 15 to 20 specialists now fell on 3 men who lacked the bandwidth, the expertise in every domain, and the time to handle it. Meetings that had once lasted 2 hours now stretched across entire days. Details that specialist staff officers would have caught, ammunition calculations, route timing, coordination with adjacent units, were missed or handled incorrectly. The first postponed assault was eventually cancelled entirely when the window of opportunity closed. The Ukrainian positions it was designed to attack had been reinforced during the delay. The second was rescheduled 3 times before being handed off to an adjacent formation, along with the implicit admission that this brigade could no longer plan and execute complex operations. The second consequence was the degradation of defensive capability. Russian forward units, companies and platoons occupying trenches and strongpoints along the front line depend on the brigade staff for fire support coordination, resupply, medical evacuation, and reinforcement. When the brigade staff was consumed by internal investigation and organizational chaos, these support functions deteriorated rapidly. Forward observers reported calling for artillery fire and waiting 30 to 40 minutes for a response. In a war where response times of 5 to 10 minutes can mean the difference between stopping a Ukrainian probe and losing a position. The delay was caused by the new requirement that all fire missions be approved through a restricted chain of command, rather than the standard procedure. By the time approval came, the targets had often moved or the tactical situation had changed. Resupply became erratic. Forward positions that had received regular deliveries of ammunition, food and water on predictable schedules now went 12 to 24 hours between deliveries as the chaotic new routing system struggled to function. Soldiers at one forward position reported going 36 hours without food delivery. Not because the food did not exist, but because the logistics system could not coordinate its delivery without the structured procedures that the paranoid security overhaul had dismantled. Medical evacuation suffered similarly. Wounded Russian soldiers at forward positions waited hours for evacuation vehicles that could not be dispatched because the routes had not been cleared through the new security protocols. According to intercepted communications, at least 3 Russian soldiers died of wounds that might have been survivable with timely evacuation, casualties caused not by Ukrainian weapons, but by their own brigade's internal dysfunction. The human toll extended beyond physical casualties. Intercepted personal communications, messages from Russian soldiers to family members, captured through Ukrainian signals intelligence, painted a picture of a formation in psychological crisis. Soldiers described an atmosphere of constant suspicion where speaking to the wrong person or asking the wrong question could result in accusations of espionage. Junior officers reported being interrogated by military police about their communications habits, their contacts, and their loyalty. NCOs described being ordered to monitor their soldiers' phone usage and report anything suspicious, a task that consumed time and energy that should have been directed at defending their positions against the actual enemy. One intercepted message from a Russian sergeant to his wife captured the atmosphere with devastating clarity. He wrote that he was more afraid of his own command than of the Ukrainians, that at least with the Ukrainians, you knew where the danger was. Inside the brigade, the danger could be anyone, anywhere, and no one knew who to trust. 2 planned Russian assault operations were postponed indefinitely because the brigade staff could not coordinate the logistics, fire support, and troop movements required. The planning process that normally took days now took weeks, as every piece of information was restricted to the smallest possible circle, and every decision was second-guessed by a commander who no longer trusted his own people. Supply convoys stopped following predetermined routes entirely. Drivers were given directions only at the moment of departure, with routes chosen at random by the logistics officer's replacement. A junior captain who lacked the experience and the relationships with forward units needed to coordinate effective supply operations. Convoys took longer, consumed more fuel, and frequently arrived at the wrong locations because the chaotic routing system prioritized security over efficiency. Artillery batteries relocated so frequently that their crews spent more time moving than firing. A battery that should reposition every 2 to 3 days was moving every 6 to 8 hours. A tempo that exhausted the crews, wore out vehicle engines, consumed fuel at unsustainable rates, and reduced the volume of fire available to support forward operations by an estimated 60 to 70%. Look at this cascade effect. One suspected intelligence leak, whether from a human source, a compromised communication system, or something else entirely, triggered a chain reaction that degraded every function of the Russian brigade. Logistics, artillery, planning, communications, command relationships, unit cohesion, trust, all of it eroded, not by Ukrainian firepower, but by the fear that Ukrainian firepower could reach anything, anywhere, at any time. Is the psychological destruction of a unit's internal trust more effective than physical destruction of its equipment? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now let us count the confirmed physical losses across the 4 weeks. Week 1, 2 supply convoys destroyed, 14 trucks total, carrying ammunition, fuel, and equipment worth an estimated $8 to $12 million. Approximately 20 to 30 Russian logistics personnel killed or wounded. Week 2, 1 artillery battery destroyed, 4 guns eliminated, with crews suffering an estimated 15 to 20 casualties. Replacement value of the artillery systems, approximately $8 to $12 million. 1 additional supply convoy intercepted and partially destroyed. 3 of 6 trucks hit, cargo lost, estimated value $2 to $3 million. Week 3, 1 fuel depot destroyed, over 200,000 liters of diesel plus fuel trucks and support equipment, estimated value $3 to $5 million. 1 command observation post struck based on leaked location data. 4 Russian officers killed, communications equipment destroyed, estimated value $1 to $2 million. Week 4, 1 additional ammunition storage point struck. Secondary explosions lasted over 2 hours. Estimated stored ammunition value $4 to $7 million. 1 logistics coordination point destroyed. Vehicles, equipment, and personnel losses estimated at $1 to $2 million. Total confirmed physical losses across 4 weeks: $27 to $43 million in equipment, supplies, and vehicles destroyed. Approximately 70 to 100 Russian personnel killed or wounded from the direct strikes alone. How many Russian operations do you think were cancelled or delayed because of the paranoia inside this brigade? A. 1, 2, B. 3 to 5, C. More than 5. Drop your answer below. But the physical losses, significant as they are, represent only a fraction of the total damage. The operational paralysis caused by the internal investigation and the collapse of trust within the brigade staff inflicted costs that dwarf the value of the destroyed equipment. 2 cancelled assault operations represent weeks of wasted planning, stockpiled ammunition that was never used or was subsequently destroyed, fuel consumed in preparation movements that led nowhere, and the strategic cost of failing to advance when the Russian High Command expected progress. Estimated waste from cancelled operations: $5 to $10 million. The constant relocation of artillery batteries consumed fuel, wore out vehicle components, and reduced combat effectiveness to an estimated 30 to 40% of normal output for approximately 3 weeks. The cost of this degradation, measured in reduced fire support, extended maintenance requirements, and consumed fuel, is estimated at $3 to $5 million. The chaotic supply routing system that replaced the compromised logistics procedures resulted in delayed deliveries, misrouted convoys, spoiled medical supplies, and chronic shortages at forward positions. Russian frontline units in the brigade sector reported critical ammunition and food shortages during the 2nd and 3rd weeks, shortages that were not caused by Ukrainian interdiction, but by the brigade's own dysfunctional logistics. Estimated cost of logistics inefficiency: $2 to $4 million. The removal of 3 senior staff officers, the logistics officer, the communications chief, and the operations officer, deprived the brigade of experienced leadership at the worst possible moment. Their replacements were less experienced, less familiar with the sector, and less trusted by both the brigade commander and the subordinate unit commanders they were supposed to coordinate with. The degradation in staff quality contributed to every other problem: worse planning, worse logistics, worse communication, worse decision-making at every level. Total estimated Russian losses, physical and operational combined: direct strike damage, $27 to $43 million. Cancelled operations and wasted preparation, $5 to $10 million. Artillery degradation and excess fuel consumption, $3 to $5 million. Logistics inefficiency and supply shortages, $2 to $4 million. Personnel losses from direct strikes, $2 to $3 million in training and replacement costs. Staff officer removal and leadership degradation, incalculable but significant. Total, $39 to $65 million. The cost to Ukrainian forces of the strikes that exploited the intelligence, HIMARS rockets, artillery shells, drone operations, and surveillance assets is estimated at approximately $2 to $4 million across the 4-week period. $4 million to inflict $65 million in damage and operationally cripple an entire Russian brigade for over a month. A cost-exchange ratio of approximately 16 to 1. And that ratio does not account for the most devastating effect of all: the destruction of trust within the Russian command structure, which may never be fully restored. If facts like these expose the fragility behind Russia's military facade, type truth in the comments. What do you think happened to the mole? Caught, escaped, or still operating? Tell us below. The Russian soldiers in that brigade are still fighting on the Eastern Front. The brigade was never pulled off the line. Russia does not have enough reserves to rotate formations in and out of combat. But confirmed reports indicate that its combat effectiveness remains severely degraded weeks after the apparent intelligence compromise ended. Officers still do not trust each other. Planning still takes longer than it should. Information still flows too slowly through a command structure scarred by weeks of suspicion and accusation. And the mole? Ukrainian intelligence has not commented. Russian communications intercepts suggest that the brigade's internal investigation identified a suspect, a junior staff officer with access to logistics planning. But whether this individual was actually the source, a scapegoat for a systemic security failure, or simply the victim of a paranoid witch hunt remains unclear. What is clear is that the damage was done, not just by the Ukrainian strikes, but by the knowledge that those strikes were made possible by someone who sat in the same briefing rooms, ate in the same field kitchen, and wore the same uniform as the men whose positions were being destroyed. That knowledge is a weapon that no countermeasure can defeat. You can change your codes, you can move your command post, you can restrict your communications, but you cannot eliminate the possibility that someone in your own organization is working against you. And the effort of trying to eliminate that possibility can be more destructive than the betrayal itself. Every Russian brigade on the front line in Ukraine now operates with the awareness that Ukrainian intelligence penetration, whether through human sources, signals intercepts, or technical surveillance, can compromise any operation, any position, any plan. That awareness breeds caution. Caution breeds slowness. Slowness breeds vulnerability. And vulnerability breeds defeat. 3 questions before you go. First, if a single intelligence source inside a Russian brigade can enable the destruction of over $65 million in military assets and operationally paralyze the formation for a month, how many other Russian brigades are harboring similar vulnerabilities that Ukrainian intelligence has already identified or is working to exploit? Second, the internal paranoia caused by the suspected mole degraded the brigade's combat effectiveness more than the physical strikes themselves. At what point does the Russian military's growing culture of internal suspicion, fueled by Ukrainian intelligence operations, become a strategic-level problem that undermines Russia's entire war effort? Third, the mole may or may not have been found, but the damage was done in 4 weeks. How many other quiet intelligence operations is Ukraine running right now? And how many Russian commanders are about to discover that their secrets are not secrets at all? Think about that. Subscribe to Steel Command, share this video. The most powerful weapon in this war is not a missile or a drone, it is information. And Ukraine has proven, again and again, that it knows how to turn information into destruction. The world needs to see this.